Have you ever wondered why, even after so long, certain relationships still crumble you like you were 5 years old? Why do you cling so tightly, so quickly, to those who give you the slightest bit of attention? Why do you feel like the whole world is collapsing when someone pulls away or simply stops responding? It's not an exaggeration. It's not drama. It's a child inside you screaming, silently, for something it never received. Erich Fromm doesn't use the term inner child directly in The Art of Loving, but the entire emotional structure he describes points exactly to that. The formation of our way of loving comes from our childhood, from how we were loved, seen, or ignored. He states, "The experience of separation provokes anxiety. It is, by far, the most intense source of anguish in man. And it is precisely in childhood that this experience of separation manifests with the most brutality. The child is born completely dependent. It needs to be fed, protected, touched, validated, and above all, it needs to feel emotionally safe. When this doesn't happen, when the love received is conditional, unstable, absent, or manipulative, an invisible wound is created. And this wound doesn't disappear with time. It just hides under adult masks, forced self-sufficiency, impulsive relationships, constant need to be desired, paralyzing fear of rejection. Fromm writes about how many adults seek in relationships a symbolic way back to the womb, to the state of security and total fusion. This, according to him, is a regression, not evolution. He says, "In the childish form of love, I love because I am loved. In the mature form, I am loved because I love." The childish form of love still lives in you when you seek someone to love you, so that you can then feel complete. This logic is deeply emotional, not rational. The wounded child inside you learned that to be loved, it needed to please. It needed to be useful. It needed to not be a bother. And now, as an adult, you continue trying to deserve love, trying to fit in, trying to be enough for someone to stay. But the problem was never that you weren't worthy of love. The problem was that you learned you had to strive to have it. And this shaped your entire view of affection. It shaped your way of loving, of giving yourself, of protecting yourself. What you call love is often just this child repeating old patterns. If I am perfect, they won't abandon me. If I please, they will choose me. If I am needed, they will love me. And this cycle is cruel, because no matter how much you do, how much you give, how much you nullify yourself, nothing will be enough to silence the pain of the child that still believes love must be earned. And as long as you ignore this part of you, you will continue attracting relationships that only confirm this wound, relationships that do not heal, only reinforce. But there is a way out. Healing does not come from the outside. It does not come from the next relationship, the next promise, the next crumb of attention. Healing begins when you finally look at this child, not with judgment, but with compassion. When you stop demanding that others take care of what is your responsibility. And it is here that we begin to walk the path of emotional maturity, the path of true love. In the next part, we will talk about what this really means, what mature love is according to Fromm, why it is so rare, and how you can start to build it within yourself, even after so long trying to fill it from the outside. Loving truly is one of the most demanding tasks of human life. It is no coincidence that most people fail miserably when trying, because loving is not falling in love. It is not desire. It is not attachment. Loving, as Erich Fromm teaches us, is an act of courage, of conscious decision, of emotional discipline. And that is exactly why it is so rare, because it requires you to be whole before even touching the other. Fromm does not mince words. Love is an activity, not a passive affection. It is a continuous standing up, not a sudden falling. In general, the active character of love can be described by saying that to love is, above all, to give and not to receive. This quote is a reality check because it destroys one of the most ingrained illusions of contemporary culture, that love is something that simply happens to us, that it is something magical, involuntary, a beautiful accident. But Fromm says the opposite. Loving is an action, a practice, a constant commitment. It is a choice that is renewed every day, even when passion runs out, even when the other fails, even when life weighs down. And here is the detail that exposes how unprepared most people are to love. You cannot offer what you have not built within yourself. Fromm states, "The problem of human existence is that of separation. Love is the answer to this problem, but only those who have overcome the separation within themselves can truly love." In other words, as long as you are internally fragmented, you will use the other as a patch. You will confuse presence with salvation. You will think that being with someone is enough, when in fact, to love is to be with someone, even when it would be easier to flee. And this is only possible when you have already resolved the most difficult conflict, the relationship you have with yourself. Loving requires presence, and presence requires maturity. Most relationships collapse not due to the absence of feeling, but due to the absence of emotional structure. People who confuse attention with love, attachment with bond, neediness with surrender. Fromm insists, love is an art. And like all art, it requires learning, patience, practice, and, perhaps most importantly, humility. He writes, "Anyone who intends to learn the art of loving must start in the same way one starts to learn any other art, through practice, discipline, concentration, and patience." But how many are truly willing to do this? How many are willing to stop consuming love as if it were a shelf product, ready to be used and discarded? To truly love is to swim against the current of immediate culture, against the inflated ego, against the fear of vulnerability. To truly love is to have the courage to strip down emotionally without any guarantee that the other will do the same, and still love. This is the point at which love ceases to be a romantic fantasy and becomes an internal revolution. When you stop wanting someone to save you and start being someone with whom you can build. When you stop begging for affection and start choosing to love consciously, clearly, responsibly. When you do not love because you need to, but because you want to. But for this to happen, it is necessary to see and abandon one of the greatest emotional traps of our times, the infantilization of love promoted by modern culture. The idea that to love is to be chosen, to please, to fit in, and that the other is there to fill our voids. In the next part, we will dissect this collective fantasy and show why it prevents so many people from living a real love. We live in a culture that packages love as a product, easy to consume, easy to discard, seductive at first glance, and superficial in content. Hollywood, social media, romantic songs, everything repeats the same sweet and dangerously false message, that to love is to find someone who completes you, someone who makes you happy, someone who fills your voids with presence, affection, and promises. But that is not love. It is emotional dependency disguised as poetry. And Erich Fromm knew this long before the age of algorithms. He writes, "In modern culture, most people believe that loving is simple, and that the difficult part is finding the right object to love, or to be loved by. This belief results from the superficial idea that loving is easy for anyone. And here lies the trap. People do not want to learn to love. They want to be loved effortlessly. They want to live intense romances without having to look within. They want to be desired without asking themselves why. They want the other as a mirror that confirms their own idealized image, and not as a real encounter between two imperfect human beings. The infantilization of love begins right there. When we turn the relationship into a fantasy field, where the other exists to save us from ourselves. Fromm denounces this as a structural flaw in our society. We are not taught to love, we are conditioned to desire status, beauty, approval, pleasure. And we project all of this onto the other. We want someone to prove to us that we are special, to take us out of loneliness, doubt, insecurity. But that is not love. It is a search for an emotional father, for a nurturing mother, for someone to take on the responsibility that should be ours. He also points out that, in immature love, the other is seen as an object of emotional consumption, something that must work for me to feel good. And here is the most uncomfortable point. You may be relating not to another person, but to the idea of what that person makes you feel. This explains why so many people do not love, they just cling. And why so many relationships end as soon as the illusion falls. Culture trains us to desire sensations, not connections, to seek intensity, not intimacy, to consume the other, not to build together. The result? Fragile, anxious relationships, hypersensitive to the slightest sign of frustration. People who fall in love quickly, but burn out even faster. Loves based on expectation, not on reality. On neediness, not on choice. And all of this is constantly reinforced by a system that profits from your dissatisfaction, that sells the promise that the next one will be better, that if you haven't found the one yet, it's because you haven't tried hard enough to appear more desirable, more interesting, more perfect. But true love does not happen in showcases. It does not arise from emotional marketing. It can only emerge when two people meet without the need to complete each other, but with the willingness to share themselves. And this requires a type of awareness that goes against everything we have been taught about what it means to love. In the next and final part, we will talk about this turning point, the moment you stop seeking love to fill yourself and start loving as an act of freedom, a love that does not arise from neediness, but from overflow. That does not require being chosen, because you have already chosen yourself entirely. Let's get there. True love begins exactly where need ends. It does not arise from lack, urgency, or the fear of being alone. It is born from presence, from your ability to remain whole in front of another, without nullifying yourself, without losing yourself, without begging to be validated. When you still need to be chosen to feel valuable, you are not loving. You are just trying to exist through the other. You are trying to prove to yourself once again that you are worthy of being seen. But real love has nothing to do with that. It is not a cry for help. It is not neediness disguised as passion. Authentic love is a choice. It is the natural expression of someone who has already found themselves, who has already seen themselves as a whole, who has already faced their own emptiness, and decided no longer to use it as an excuse to emotionally depend on anyone. You have spent too much time seeking someone to make you feel special. But what if you stopped today? What if you decided that from now on, your worth will no longer be measured by the eyes of others? Because that is exactly where freedom begins. The love that comes after this does not bind, does not demand, does not suffocate. It shares, adds, builds. It does not try to fill what is lacking. It overflows. Now I want to know from you. If this message resonated with you, leave in the comments. I do not need to be chosen to feel whole. Write this as a commitment to yourself. Because it is when you declare this that you begin to take control of your story. And if this touched you, do not stop here. The next video is also essential on this journey. Watch it. It may show you what you have not yet had the courage to face.